Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the TDF Vengeance, staring out at the stars through the massive viewing screen. The ship was the largest in the Terran Defense Force fleet, built for war and designed to survive anything the galaxy could throw at it. Its thick armor plates bore scars from a dozen battles, and its weapons could crack a moon in half. The bridge was quiet except for the soft hum of computers and the steady breathing of the crew. Morrison had been admiral for 8 years now, and he knew his people well. They were all born on Earth, shaped by a world that tried to kill everything that lived on it. Other species in the galaxy called humans Deathworlders because of this. They said it like it was a bad thing. "Admiral, we're getting something strange on long-range communications," said Captain Lisa Rodriguez from her station. She was Morrison's tactical officer and one of the best in the fleet. Her fingers moved quickly over her control panel as she tried to make sense of what she was seeing. "What kind of strange?" Morrison asked, walking over to her station. "It's not from any human ship or station. The signal pattern is completely different from anything in our databases. And sir, it's coming from 17 different star systems." At once, Morrison frowned. In his years of service, he had never heard of anything like that. Put it on speakers. And the sound that filled the bridge was unlike anything they had ever heard. It was musical but sad, like crystal bells ringing in a minor key. There were words too, but they were in a language no human had ever spoken. "Dr. Ben Carter to the bridge," Morrison said into his communicator. Carter was the fleet's xenobiologist, the expert on alien life forms. If anyone could make sense of this, it would be him. Carter arrived within minutes, his lab coat still stained with whatever he had been working on. He was a thin man with wild hair who loved puzzles more than people. "What do we have, Admiral?" "Listen to this," Rodriguez said, playing the signal again. Carter's eyes lit up as he heard the strange music. Fascinating. The mathematical structure suggests a highly advanced species. The harmonic patterns indicate they use sound and vibration for more than just communication. This might be how they think. "Can you translate it?" Morrison asked. "Give me an hour with the computer systems and I'll have something for you." While Carter worked, Morrison gathered his senior staff in the briefing room. Besides Rodriguez, there was Commander Pete Davis, who led the Marines, and Chief Engineer Maya Patel, who kept the ships running. These three had served with Morrison for years, and he trusted them with his life. "Whatever this is, it's big," Morrison told them. 17 star systems don't coordinate a message like this unless something serious is happening. Could be a trap, Davis said. He was a large man with scars on his hands from years of combat. "Maybe some new species wants to lure our ships into an ambush. Or it could be someone asking for help," Patel suggested. She was younger than the others, but just as experienced. The tone of that signal didn't sound threatening to me. An hour later, Carter called them back to the bridge. His face was pale, and his hands shook slightly as he worked his controls. "I've got a partial translation, Admiral. You need to hear this." The speakers crackled, and then a voice spoke in heavily accented but understandable English. The words were slow and careful, as if the speaker was learning the language as they went. "People of Earth, we are the Zephyrian Coalition.
Yeah, we have
Learned your language from signals that travel between your stars. We send this message because we have no other choice. Our people are dying. Our worlds are being destroyed. We have asked the Galactic Council for help, but they will not listen. They say we must face our fate alone." The voice paused, and they could hear something like crying in the background. "There's an enemy that eats worlds. They're called the Hive Collective. They take everything. Plants, animals, rocks, water, air. They leave nothing behind but empty space. They have already taken 47 of our worlds. Our homeworld will be next." Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard rumors of something like this from traders and explorers, but he had never believed them. "We know that other species fear you. They call you Deathworlders. Say you are violent and dangerous. We do not care about this. You're about to die. If you are as strong as they say, please help us. We can offer you our technology, our friendship, our loyalty forever. But we cannot offer you much time. The Hive comes to our homeworld in less than 7 days." The message ended with coordinates. "To a star system far from human space. Carter looked up from his controls with worry in his eyes. Admiral, I've been checking those coordinates against our star charts. That system is real, and it's exactly where the signal originated from. Rodriguez pulled up tactical displays on the main screen. Sir, if we're going to respond, we need to leave now. That system is 6 days away at maximum speed. Morrison looked around the bridge at his crew. They were all waiting for his decision. Smart choice would be to report this to Earth Command and let someone else decide. But Earth Command was 3 weeks away by the fastest messenger ship. By the time they got orders, the Zephyrians would be dead. Maya, how many ships in the Third Fleet are ready for immediate deployment? He asked. All 12 heavy cruisers? Are fully supplied and armed, Admiral. Crews are rested and ready. Morrison made his choice. Signaled the fleet. We leave in 2 hours. Full battle configuration, Sir Davis said carefully. We don't know anything about these Zephyrians. They could be lying about everything, maybe Morrison replied. But if they're telling the truth, and we do nothing, an entire species dies. I didn't join the Defense Force to let that happen. As the crew rushed to prepare for departure, Morrison stood alone on the bridge looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, aliens who had never met a human were counting on Earth's warriors to save them. It was exactly the kind of impossible situation that humans seemed to find themselves in. The Terran Defense Force had been created to protect humanity from the dangers of space. Now, they were about to risk everything to protect complete strangers. Morrison smiled grimly. Maybe being called Deathworlders wasn't such a bad thing after all. The Third Fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zephyrian system, and Admiral Morrison immediately knew they were too late for some worlds. The scanners showed 3 planets that should have been green and blue, but instead glowed. With an ugly red light, whatever lived there was gone. My God, whispered Captain Rodriguez as she read the sensor data. There's nothing left on those worlds. No plants, no oceans, not even an atmosphere. They're just hot rocks now. Morrison stared at the tactical display. He had seen war before, but this was different. This wasn't conquest or even destruction. This was consumption. Something had eaten entire worlds down to the core. Take us to the 4th planet, he ordered. That's where the signal came from. As they approached Zephyr Prime, Morrison could see it was still alive, but barely. The planet's surface was covered with massive crystal formations that caught and reflected the system's star. It looked beautiful from space, but the scanners showed underground explosions and energy readings that suggested a world under siege. I'm detecting life signs in the crystal formations, reported Lieutenant Amy Foster from her intelligence station. They're underground, probably hiding. Morrison nodded to Commander Davis. Pete, take a team down there. Find out what we're dealing with. Commander Sam Brooks, Davis's second in command, suited up with a squad of Marines. Brooks was a calm man who had seen action on 5 different worlds. His team included Sergeant Ryan Cooper, a tough soldier who could adapt to any situation, and Corporal Nancy West, their communications expert. The shuttle landed near the largest crystal formation, a mountain-sized structure that hummed with internal energy. The Marines had expected to find a normal city, but instead they found something that looked like the inside of a giant gem. The walls were made of living crystal that pulsed with soft light, and the passages curved in ways that hurt to look at. This place is incredible, Cooper said over the radio. The crystals are warm to the touch, and they seem to be alive. They followed the tunnels deeper underground until they reached a vast chamber filled with beings unlike anything they had ever seen. The Zephyrians were tall and thin, standing nearly 8 feet high. Their bodies were made of living crystal that shifted color based on their emotions. Right now, most of them glowed with the deep blue of sadness and fear. One of the Zephyrians approached them, moving with grace despite their size. When it spoke, the words came out as musical tones that somehow became understandable in their minds. You are the humans from the Death World, the alien said. I am Elder Kethmer of the Zephyrian Coalition. We did not think you would come. Brooks removed his helmet to show respect. We received your message. Admiral Morrison sent us to help. Kethmer's crystal body shifted to a lighter blue, the color of hope mixed with disbelief. Oh, but you barely know us. Why would you risk your lives for strangers? Because it's the right thing to do, Brooks replied simply. The elder led them deeper into the Crystal City, explaining their situation as they walked. The Zephyrians had evolved on a world where violence was almost unknown. They had no concept of war, no weapons, no armies. They had built their civilization on art, music, and the growing of crystal structures that could last for thousands of years. We thought all species were like us, Kethmer explained. When we reached the stars and found others, we were surprised by their aggressive nature, but we learned to avoid conflict. We became diplomats and traders. We believed that all problems could be solved with discussion. They reached another chamber where dozens of Zephyrians sat in circles around smaller crystals. The crystals showed images of the Hive Collective's attacks on other worlds. Brooks watched in horror as massive insect-like ships descended on peaceful planets and began to strip them bare. The Hive came to our space 2 years ago, Kethmer continued. First, we tried to communicate with them. We offered them trade, friendship, even some of our worlds if they would leave the rest of us alone. But they do not communicate, they only consume. One of the viewing crystals showed a close-up of the Hive creatures.
Ow.
They looked like giant beetles with metallic shells and multiple arms that ended in cutting tools. They moved in perfect coordination, like parts of a single organism. They worked together as one mind, Kethmer explained. Each creature is controlled by larger beings they call queens. The queens are the size of your largest ships, and they can control millions of workers across multiple star systems. Brooks asked to speak with Admiral Morrison, and within minutes, the Admiral's face appeared on his suit's communication screen. Admiral, you need to see this, Brooks said, pointing his camera at the viewing crystals. This enemy is unlike anything we've faced before. They're not just attacking these people. They're eating their entire civilization. Morrison studied the images of the Hive ships. Each one was a biological nightmare, part insect and part machine. They move through space like living things, and their ships seem to grow rather than being built. How many of them are coming to your homeworld? Morrison asked Kethmer. The elder's crystal body darkened to a deep purple, the color of terrible fear. Our sensors detect 3 queen ships approaching. Each one carries millions of workers. They will arrive in 2 days. Back on the Vengeance, Morrison gathered his senior staff to analyze what they had learned. Dr. Carter was fascinated by the Zephyrian biology and technology, but Maya Patel was more concerned with the tactical situation. Admiral, we're looking at an enemy that can coordinate attacks across multiple star systems, she said. Our weapons are designed to fight ships with crews who want to survive. These creatures don't seem to care about survival at all. Lieutenant Foster had been studying the Hive's attack patterns. Sir, they follow the same strategy on every world. They overwhelm the defenses with numbers, then systematically consume everything. They've never encountered resistance that could adapt to their tactics. Morrison looked at the tactical display showing his 12 ships against the approaching Hive fleet. The numbers were not encouraging. 3 queen ships meant millions of enemy fighters. But humans had won impossible battles before. What advantages do we have? He asked his staff. The Zephyrians' crystal technology is incredibly advanced, Dr. Carter reported. Their energy systems are more efficient than ours, and they can grow new structures at incredible speed. If we could combine their technology with our weapons... The Hive has never fought humans before, Rodriguez added. They're used to enemies who follow predictable patterns. We don't. Morrison nodded. Pete, I want you to start training volunteers. From the Zephyrian population, they may not be warriors, but they know their own world better than anyone. Sir, with respect, these people have never held a weapon in their lives, Davis replied. Then we'll teach them. Amy, I want you to study everything the Zephyrians know about the Hive. Find weaknesses, patterns, anything we can use, as his staff. Dispersed to carry out their orders, Morrison remained on the bridge, staring at the approaching enemy signatures on the scanner. In 48 hours, the Hive would arrive at Zephyr Prime. 12 human ships and a handful of crystal beings would be all that. Stood between an ancient species and complete extinction. He had been in impossible situations before, but this was different. This time, failure meant watching an entire civilization disappear forever. Morrison smiled grimly. Maybe it was time to show the galaxy what Deathworlders could really do when they got angry. Admiral Morrison stood in the center of the largest crystal chamber on Zephyr Prime, watching his people work alongside the aliens. The sight would have amazed him a week ago, but now he had bigger concerns. The Hive fleet would arrive in less than 36 hours, and they were nowhere near ready. Elder Kethmer approached him, the crystal being's body glowing with nervous yellow light. Admiral, our people are frightened. Many do not understand why we must fight. We have always believed that violence only creates more violence. Morrison looked around the chamber where human Marines were trying to teach Zephyrians how to hold weapons. It was not going well. The crystal beings were strong and fast, but they flinched every time they touched a gun. Your people don't have to fight, Morrison said, but they do have to survive. And sometimes survival means standing up to bullies. In another part of the chamber, Chief Engineer Maya Patel was working with Zephyrian technicians to modify human weapons. The aliens could grow crystal structures with their minds, shaping them like clay. Patel had discovered that these crystals could focus energy beams and make human laser weapons much more powerful. This is incredible, she said to her Zephyrian partner, a being called Nethera, whose body sparkled with excitement. Your crystals can channel energy without losing any power. Our weapons will be 3 times stronger with these modifications. Nethera's form shifted to bright green, the color of joy among their people. We are happy to help. Your people are the first to treat us as equals instead of strange curiosities. Across the chamber, Engineer Don Sullivan was working on an even bigger project. The Zephorians had explained that their entire planet was connected by crystal networks that carried energy and information. Sullivan was trying to figure out how to turn this network into a weapon. The crystals can amplify psychic energy, Doctor. Carter explained as he studied the alien technology. The Zephyrians use them to communicate across vast distances. But if we could modify the frequency, we could disrupt the Hive's command signals, Sullivan finished. Break the link between the Queens and their workers. Meanwhile, Captain Helen Brooks was on the bridge of the TDF Warrior working out new battle plans. Traditional human naval tactics assumed fighting enemies who wanted to survive. But the Hive workers would throw themselves at human ships without caring about losses. We need to target the command ships first, she told her tactical officer. Cut off the head and the body dies. Yes. But sir, the Queen ships will be protected by thousands of fighters. We'll never get close enough. That's what they'll expect. But humans don't always do what's expected. On the planet's surface, Colonel Jim Parker was establishing defensive positions around the most important crystal formations. The Zephyrians had explained that these crystals were like the brain centers of their civilization. If the Hive destroyed them, the entire planet's technology would fail. We need to make them pay for every inch, Parker told his Marines. The longer we hold out, the more time our ships have to work. Sergeant Cooper was training a mixed unit of humans and Zephyrians. The crystal beings were natural at creating instant fortifications, growing walls and barriers from the ground in seconds. But they had no idea how to use these defenses tactically. Think of it like a puzzle, Cooper explained to a group of young Zephyrians. The enemy wants to get from point A to point B. Our job is to make that as difficult and expensive as possible. 8 of the Zephyrians, barely more than a child, raised a crystalline hand. But why do they want to hurt us? We've done nothing to them. Cooper knelt down to the alien's level. Some creatures are just hungry, kid, and they see you as food. But don't worry. Humans are really good at dealing with predators. In the fleet's medical bay, Dr. Kate Murphy was studying the psychological effects of the situation on both species. The humans were adapting well to working with aliens, but the Zephyrians were struggling with concepts they had never needed before. They have no words for enemy or battle in their language, she reported to Morrison. They're trying to understand warfare with minds that evolved for cooperation and peace. They're trying, Morrison observed. That takes courage. As the preparations continued, Lieutenant Foster made a disturbing discovery in the intelligence data. The Hive's attack patterns showed that they adapted quickly to each world's defenses. By the time they reached Zephyr Prime, they would have learned from 47 previous conquests. Admiral, the Hive ships are carrying biological samples from every world they've consumed, she reported. They're not just taking resources. They're collecting knowledge and genetic material. Morrison felt a chill. You mean they learn from their victims? Yes, sir. Every species they've defeated makes them stronger. They know how to counter energy shields, kinetic weapons, even some forms of biological warfare. But Morrison noticed something else in the data. Look at their response times. They adapt to new threats, but it takes them several hours to reprogram. Their entire fleet, if we can keep changing our tactics fast enough, we might stay ahead of their adaptations, Foster agreed. As the day wore on, the joint human-Cephrian forces began to take shape. The crystal beings learned to create defensive structures that complemented human military tactics. The humans learned to fight alongside allies who could reshape the battlefield in real time. Elder Kethmer found Morrison in the command center as the sun set over the crystal cities. The alien's body glowed with deep blue uncertainty. Admiral, I must ask you something that troubles me. If we win this battle, what happens next? Will your people stay to protect us? Will they expect payment? Will they try to rule us? Morrison considered the question carefully. Other species in the galaxy seemed to think humans were aggressive conquerors who took what they wanted by force. Maybe it was time to show them something different. Elder, humans have a saying, we judge people by their actions, not their words. Your people called for help when they were dying, and they offered everything they had to strangers. That tells us who you are. Kethmer's crystal form brightened slightly. And what does that mean for our future? It means that if we survive, tomorrow, the Zephyrian Coalition will have friends who understand what it means to fight for something bigger than yourself. As night fell over Zephyr Prime, the combined forces made their final preparations. Human ships took positions throughout the system while crystal-enhanced weapons were distributed to every defender. The planetary defense network was modified. To disrupt hive communications and backup plans were prepared for every possible scenario. Morrison stood on the bridge of the Vengeance, looking out at the stars where the enemy would soon appear. His ships were outnumbered 1,000 to 1, and they were fighting to save people they had known for less than 3 days. By any reasonable measure, it was suicide, but humans had never been particularly reasonable. They had a bad habit of fighting impossible battles and somehow winning them. Tomorrow, the galaxy would learn why other species called them Deathworlders, why that might not be such a bad thing after all. The Hive Collective had consumed 47 worlds without meeting serious resistance. They were about to discover what happened when you tried to eat something that could bite back. The Hive fleet arrived like a plague of metal locusts against the stars. Admiral Morrison watched from the bridge of the Vengeance as 3 massive queen ships dropped out of hyperspace, each one the size of a small moon. Around them swarmed thousands of smaller vessels, all moving with the terrifying coordination of a single mind. My God, whispered Captain Rodriguez. There are so many of them. The enemy ships were unlike anything in human military databases. They looked grown rather than built, with organic curves and surfaces that pulsed with alien life. The queen ships had massive sensor arrays that swept across the system like hungry eyes, and weapons that crackled with deadly energy. All ships. This is Admiral Morrison. He broadcast to the fleet. Remember the plan? We hit them hard, we hit them fast, and we keep moving. Don't give them time to adapt. The first phase of the battle began with Captain Tony Clark leading the destroyer TDF Reaper in a suicide run against the smallest queen ship. Clark was a veteran of 12 battles who had volunteered for the most dangerous part of the plan. Reaper. To Fleet Command, Clark's voice came over the radio, calm despite the impossible odds. Beginning attack run.
Oh.
Tell my wife I kept my promise. The Reaper accelerated toward the queen ship, its crystal-enhanced weapons charging to full power. The Hive responded exactly as predicted, sending waves of fighters to intercept the single human ship. Clark weaved through the enemy formation, the ship's guns blazing, but the real attack came from Captain Helen Brooks and the TDF Warrior, approaching from the opposite direction while the Hive focused on Clark. Brooks had studied the enemy coordination patterns and found a weakness. The hive ships all responded to threats simultaneously, leaving them vulnerable to attacks from multiple directions. "Now," she ordered, and 6 human cruisers opened fire on the Queen ship's command section. The crystal-enhanced weapons punched through the organic armor like it was paper. The Queen ship's death scream echoed across space as its psychic voice was silenced forever. Instantly, thousands of hive fighters stopped moving, their connection to the controlling mind severed. "It worked," Rodriguez shouted. "The drones are confused, but the victory came at a price." The Reaper, damaged by its desperate attack run, limped away from the battle with its engines failing. Clark's sacrifice had given them their first success, but 2 Queen ships remained. On the planet's surface, the second phase of the battle was beginning. Massive hive landing craft, each one carrying thousands of biological soldiers, descended toward the crystal cities. Colonel Parker watched them approach from his command bunker. "All units, hold your fire until they're in range," he ordered. "Let them come to us." The hive ground forces were even more terrifying up close. They looked like giant beetles with cutting tools for hands and armor thick enough to stop most weapons. They moved in perfect formation, following programming that had conquered 47 worlds, but they had never faced humans before. When the enemy reached the outer defenses, Sergeant Cooper gave the signal. Instantly, the Zephyrians began growing crystal barriers from the ground, creating a maze of walls and obstacles that broke up the hive formation. The orderly advance turned into chaos as the alien soldiers found themselves separated and confused. "Fire," Parker commanded. Human weapons, enhanced with Zephyrian crystal technology, tore through the hive forces. The enemy soldiers were strong and fast, but they followed predictable patterns. They had been programmed to overwhelm defenses with numbers, not to adapt to constantly changing battlefield conditions. The young Zephyrian that Sergeant Cooper had been training proved surprisingly effective. The crystal beam could sense where the enemy would move next and grow walls to block their advance. It was like watching a chess master who could change the board while the game was being played. "You're doing great, kid," Cooper told the alien. As they worked together to trap a group of hive soldiers in a crystal cage, "Your people are natural tacticians. You just never needed to use it for war before." But the battle was far from over. In space, the remaining Queen ships had learned from their sisters' destruction. They spread their fighter escorts in wider formations and began targeting the human ships with weapons that adapted to each attack. Morrison watched as the TDF Thunder took a direct hit from a bioenergy cannon. The ship's shields held, but barely. "Maya, how long until the planetary disruption network is ready?" "5 more minutes, Admiral," Chief Engineer Patel replied from the planet's surface. "Don Sullivan is making the final connections now." Those 5 minutes felt like hours as the human fleet fought desperately to stay alive. The hive ships were learning their tactics and adapting their responses. What had worked in the first attack was already becoming useless. Then Lieutenant Foster made a discovery that changed everything. "Admiral, I'm reading massive energy signatures from inside the Queen ships. I think the controlling minds are biological computers made from absorbed alien consciousnesses." Morrison felt sick. "You mean those things are made from the people they conquered?" "Yes, sir. And if Dr. Carter is right about the disruption frequency, we might be able to free them." On the surface, Engineer Sullivan completed the modifications to the planetary crystal network. The entire world began to hum with harmonic energy as every crystal formation on the planet, synchronized into a single massive transmitter network, "is active," Sullivan reported. "Broadcasting disruption signal now." The effect was immediate and devastating. The harmonic frequency designed by human engineers and Zephyrian crystal growers tore through the hives, psychic control signals like a chainsaw through silk. Across the battlefield, millions of hive workers suddenly stopped following orders, but something even more amazing happened. From inside the dying Queen ships came new voices, speaking in languages that had been silent for decades. The absorbed consciousnesses of conquered species were breaking free from their hive prison. "Help us," came a voice in broken standard. We remember. We remember who we were." Captain Rodriguez stared at her sensors in amazement. "Admiral, The Queen ships are tearing themselves apart from the inside. The absorbed minds are fighting back. Morrison saw his chance. All ships, target the Queen ships now while they're distracted. Don't let them escape. The combined human-Cephrian fleet attacked with everything they had. Crystal-enhanced weapons, coordinated tactics, and pure human stubbornness overwhelmed the confused Hive forces. One by one, the massive Queen ships died, their biological systems failing as the absorbed minds rejected their captivity. The last Queen ship, desperate to escape, tried to ram the Vengeance. Morrison watched the massive alien vessel approach, its organic hull cracking and bleeding strange fluids into space. "Sir, it's going to hit us," Rodriguez warned. Morrison replied calmly, "It's going to miss." At the last second, the Admiral ordered a course change that took the Vengeance directly under the dying Queen ship. The alien vessel, guided by a failing biological computer, couldn't adjust quickly enough. It missed by less than 100 meters and exploded harmlessly in empty space. As the echo of the explosion faded and strange silence fell over the battlefield. For the first time in years, the Zephyr system was free of the Hive's presence. Threat that had consumed 47 worlds had been stopped by 12. Human ships and a species that had never known war. On the planet's surface, Colonel Parker surveyed the battlefield. Thousands of Hive soldiers lay dead, their biological programming finally silenced. But among the crystal formations, human Marines and Zephyrian defenders stood together, alive and victorious. Morrison opened a channel to all ships and ground. "Forces, this is Admiral Morrison. The Hive fleet has been destroyed. Zephyr Prime is safe." The cheers that echoed across the communication channels came in two very different languages, but they meant the same thing. Against impossible odds, the combined forces had won. The galaxy's so-called Deathworlders had proven that sometimes violence was the only way to protect peace. 3 days after the battle, Admiral Morrison stood in the crystal healing chambers deep beneath Zephyr Prime. The room glowed with soft blue light as Zephyrian healers worked alongside Dr. Kate Murphy to help the survivors of the Queen ships. What they had found inside those biological computers was both horrifying and miraculous. "We've identified fragments from 18 different species," Dr. Murphy reported, her voice filled with wonder and sadness. "Some of these consciousnesses have been trapped for over 50 years. In the crystal beds around them, alien beings slowly remembered who they used to be. There was Velkin, a traitor from the Spiral Arm whose people had been consumed 30 years ago. Next to him lay Zara, a scientist whose entire homeworld had been devoured when she was just a child. Their bodies were strange mixtures of their original forms and Hive biological technology. But their minds were finally free. Elder Kethmer approached Morrison, his crystal body shining with grateful gold light. "Admiral, we cannot express what your people have done for us. You have not just saved our lives. You have given us hope that the galaxy can be better than we feared." Morrison watched as human medics and Zephyrian healers worked side by side. 3 days ago, these two species had been complete strangers. Now they moved together like old friends, sharing knowledge and resources without hesitation.
"Your people
"Fought well," Morrison told the elder. "Seen trained soldiers who couldn't adapt as quickly as your civilians did." In the command center, Captain Rodriguez was coordinating with the rescued survivors to learn more about the Hive threat. Each freed consciousness carried memories of the worlds that had been consumed, painting a picture of an enemy that had been spreading across the galaxy for decades. "The Hive started in the Outer Rim," explained Velkin, his voice still weak. "From his ordeal, they consumed the smaller colonies first, places where no one would notice for years. By the time the major powers realized what was happening, it was too late to stop them. Lieutenant Foster was documenting everything they learned, sir. According to the survivors, there are at least 7 more Hive fleets operating in different parts of the galaxy. Each one follows the same pattern: consume, adapt, move on." Morrison felt a chill. The victory at Zephyr Prime was just the beginning, not the end. How long before they send reinforcements? "The nearest Hive fleet is 6 months away," Zara answered, "but they will come. The collective mind learns from each defeat. Next time, they will be prepared for your tactics. On the surface, engineer Don Sullivan was working with Zephyrian technicians to study the remains of the hive ships. What they found challenged everything humans thought they knew about technology and biology. These ships don't just carry weapons, Sullivan reported to Morrison. They're mobile factories that can create new soldiers and equipment from whatever materials they find. Give them a dead planet, and in 6 months they'll have a full invasion force. But the wreckage also revealed weaknesses. Chief Engineer Patel discovered that the hive's biological technology was vulnerable to certain harmonic frequencies. Working with the Zephyrians, she began designing new weapons that could disrupt hive ships from the inside. We can build devices that broadcast the disruption frequency, she explained. Plant them on hive ships, and their own biological systems will tear them apart. Meanwhile, Dr. Ben Carter was making even more interesting discoveries. The rescued consciousnesses retained memories, not just of their own species, but of dozens of others that the hive had consumed over the centuries. Admiral, we're looking at the accumulated knowledge of potentially hundreds of civilizations, Carter reported excitedly. Technology, science, culture, history. The hive didn't just steal their bodies, they stole their entire heritage. Morrison realized the implications immediately. Can we recover any of that knowledge? Some of it. Survivors remember fragments, and the Zephyrians' crystal technology can help store and organize those memories. We might be able to reconstruct entire civilizations that were thought lost forever. As the days passed, news of the victory at Zephyr Prime spread across the galaxy. The story was almost too incredible to believe. Humans, the aggressive Deathworlders that most species feared, had risked everything to save complete strangers from an enemy that had never been defeated. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Species that had avoided human space for decades began sending diplomatic messages. The Galactic Council, which had refused to help the Zephyrians, suddenly wanted to discuss mutual defense agreements. They're scared, Captain Helen Brooks observed. As she read the diplomatic reports, they're realizing that if the hive can be stopped, humans are the ones who can do it. But Morrison was more interested in a different kind of message. Small colonies and independent worlds were calling for help. Repoured, strange ships in their systems, and unexplained disappearances. The hive threat was bigger than anyone had imagined. Elder Kethmer found Morrison in his temporary office. A crystal chamber that had been grown specifically for human needs. The alien's body glowed with determined silver light. Admiral, my people have made a decision. We wish to formally request that the Zephyrian Coalition become allies with humanity. Morrison looked up from the reports he was reading. What exactly does that mean? It means we offer you our technology, our knowledge, and our loyalty in exchange for your protection and friendship. We know there are more hive fleets out there. We want to help you stop them. Morrison considered the offer carefully. An alliance like this would change everything for both species. Humans would gain access to crystal technology that could revolutionize their ships and weapons. The Zephyrians would gain the protection of the galaxy's most feared warriors. What about your people's beliefs about violence? Morrison asked. You said war goes against everything you stand for. Kethmer's crystal form darkened slightly. We have learned that there is a difference between violence for conquest and violence for protection. The hive taught us that some evils cannot be stopped with words alone. 2 weeks later, Morrison stood on the bridge of the Vengeance as the ship prepared to leave Zephyr Prime. But he wasn't leaving alone. 3 Zephyrian ships, their crystal hulls gleaming in the starlight, would accompany the human fleet back to Earth. The ships were unlike anything humans had ever built. They were grown rather than constructed, shaped by Zephyrian crystal singers, who could mold the living crystal into any form needed. The hulls could repair themselves, the weapons could adapt to different targets, and the engines ran on pure, harmonic energy. It's beautiful, Captain Rodriguez said, as she watched the alien ships take formation with the human fleet. Morrison nodded. In the cargo holds of both fleets were samples of each other's technology, along with the rescued survivors who carried the memories of lost civilizations. The alliance between humans and Zephyrians was just the beginning. As they jumped to hyperspace, Morrison thought about the future. There were 7 more hive fleets out there, threatening hundreds of innocent worlds. The Galactic Council was finally ready to take the threat seriously. But they would need human military expertise to have any chance of success. The galaxy was about to learn that. Deathworlders weren't just good at destroying things, they were also very good at protecting the things that mattered. And sometimes, that protection required showing predators what happened when they tried to hunt something that could hunt them back. The war against the Hive was far from over. But for the first time in decades, the galaxy had reason to hope. The humans had proven that even the most terrifying enemy could be defeated when people stood together and fought for something bigger than themselves. In her personal log that night, Captain Rodriguez wrote, "Today we learned that the galaxy doesn't need to fear humanity's violent nature. Instead, it should be grateful that when the monsters come calling, there are monsters willing to fight back."